Hello and a very warm welcome to Spirit of Change. My name is Philippa, and in today's programme we're going to be looking at building resilience for a changing world. And I think if there's one thing that we can be certain of in today's world, it is that there will be change. It's almost built into the fabric of our everyday lives. And the pressures both on individuals, on communities, on nations, and on all of us as a global community are building every day. So how do we survive? How do we find ways of coping with the stresses that are placed on each and every one of us? How do we find that inner resilience? Well, I'm very pleased to be joined today by a special guest who has joined us from London, and that is Sister Maureen. Maureen, welcome to you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Sister Maureen is the Programme Director for the Brahma Kumaris in London. She's been living there, based there for the past 40 years, and her role there is Programme Director. So she's in charge of the Brahma Kumaris community throughout the United Kingdom. So she's in her day-to-day life used to dealing with change and thinking on her feet and finding ways of coping moment by moment, day by day, and building inner resilience herself. Maureen, I hope you feel fully resilient today with all the change that we experience in every day, in every moment.
Right.
What for you do you find as a personal anchor for coping with change in your own personal world?
Yes, thank you for the question. I agree completely that the world is constantly changing, and somehow it feels as if the changes are happening faster and faster. It doesn't seem to be a steady state of any kind. And as things change more and more externally to us, and they will do, we somehow have to find an anchor inside, some point of stability inside, from which we can get some sort of perspective on the change. You're right, I'm working with many different kinds of people. And sometimes when you pick up the phone or you go to interact with somebody or you're working on a project, you think things are going along in a certain way, and then you find out that things have gone in a completely different direction, or the people who said that they would do something haven't done it, whatever it is. And at that moment, if I just react to the situation, then it's almost like adding fuel to a fire. You know, if somebody's a bit upset and you get upset with them, then, you know, you're both upset even more. But if there's something happening, if I just pause, somehow I'm able to see the situation more clearly and see the different perspectives. And then it's much easier to have that clarity to know what to do that's going to be the best for everyone. And I think one of the things in being resilient is that it's actually not just about protecting yourself from something, but it's really about having the inner strength to be able to do something that's going to help the situation, that's going to contribute positively for everyone. And I know in doing that, I try, not always successful, but really try to stay neutral in the sense of it's so easy to side with this one and not with that one, or vice versa. And when you do that and you alienate somebody else, you actually run into more difficulties. So part of that resilience, I feel, is about being clear, being stable inside, and thinking about what it is that you can contribute and do that is actually going to help everybody.
I think as the world changes around us, and as you say, the pace of change is getting faster every day, there can sometimes be an instinct to want to lock down and just take care of myself, make sure that I'm okay. And yet, of course, as we all know, coping with change very often requires a group response, a community response. And we can't, any of us, act as isolated individuals in today's world and make sure that I'm okay and never mind everybody else. What role do you feel community plays in building resilience into our lives?
I think community is vital, whether it's the community of your family, whether it's sometimes community in a workplace or, in the context of the Brahma Kumaris, it's a spiritual community together. And if you think about a community, there are a couple of things. How do you define a community? There seems to be in a community one common aim. There might be variations in how people fulfill that aim, but there's a one direction that you feel you're going in together. I think the other very important thing in terms of a community is trust. Trusting each other and accepting each other. And when you have these two qualities in a community, then there is a very good feeling of safety. And also knowing that if something's a burden for me or difficult for me, if I share it with somebody in that community where I do feel that trust, or I do feel that same aim and direction, that I will feel safe to share it, because I feel they will understand and they will be able to maybe just listen, Maybe it's not about even saying anything, but sometimes when things are difficult for us, we just need somebody to listen to us, and we don't listen enough in today's world. So these factors are really important in helping me move forward and understand what I have to do. Because ultimately, we have to see inside, not so much just keeping oneself safe, because if I say I have to protect myself, then there's an element of fear in that somehow. And so I can protect myself in this situation, but then I'm going to be fearful of the next situation that's going to come to me, and how do I protect myself there? If I can do something with the support of the community, maybe we do something together, we understand a response that's going to be the best for all. We work on that together. I then understand my part in that response. Then rather than saying I have to protect myself, I'm actually giving out something of myself, a good energy, an energy of a positive contribution. And that energy, if there's any positive energy you're giving out, then that's automatically a protection, because where there's positivity, where there's goodness, then negativity can't actually take that away. I always feel that goodness is stronger than negativity. And if there is negativity, let me counteract that with more goodness, with more good feeling. And then if you do that together as a community, then it really is like a fortress, it's really strong. And the community together, we protect each other in that.
As we look at these situations, and you're mentioning there the response of fear, which is our response to uncertainty, of change.
Yeah.
The world situation that we as a worldwide community face has issues in it which justifiably people can be feeling fearful about. If we look at what's happening to climate and environmental change, if we look at what's happening to food production, if we look at what's happening to politics, and the very fabric of people's lives around the world is changing so fast that there is a genuine fear there. Do you think that by maintaining that positive attitude that you're talking about is a realistic response in the face of what's coming down the track at us at an increasingly fast rate?
That's a very important question, and a very real question. And I think it's also pointing to the fact, or how much do we really understand what's going on, and how much are our responses really appropriate to what's going on in terms of these really big questions. When I look at what's happening in the world today, we talk about an environmental crisis, political crisis, economic crisis. The reality is that beneath that, there's really a crisis of values, a spiritual crisis. I think too many people have lost sight of who they are. They've lost sight of how to interact with others. What are the values that can really serve society? And if we come back to those values that can really create change, there's something I think we don't pay enough attention to. We're not attentive enough to the fact that whatever's going on within us has an effect on the state of the world. Now that seems like a very big statement, but it's actually a reality. If you take the environment, why is nature in so much chaos? And it is chaos at the moment. One is that we have been exploiting nature, so that's clear. You can see the exploitation, the values of greed and, greed for power, greed for wealth, is bringing us to exploit nature and to not look at the consequences for future generations. But also the chaos that's happening within people because of fear, because of anger, because of ego, all of those things that are causing a very profound discontentment inside of people. Those vibrations of that discontentment are having an actual effect on the atmosphere and on matter. And, you can see it in the sense that if you are feeling unhappy in yourself or fed up or whatever, there's an effect on your physical body. So according to the feelings you have inside, there's actually a physical effect that happens. If somebody's very stressed, plenty of these things have been documented now that, how our state of mind contributes to the health of the body or the disease of the body. And just think of that word, disease, dis-ease, a lack of ease within and a disease externally. And then you only need to extrapolate that a little bit further to see how our vibrations of chaos and in many places violence is actually having an effect on matter. It's as if the earth can't hold that any longer. And so we're seeing things really go in directions that we never thought were possible. So really, if I'm part of resilience, it's also understanding that bigger picture. And also then looking at what I can do to make that change inside. And then you may say, well, okay, one person makes a change. But there's always been any major change that's happened in history has usually been because of the vision of one person or a small group of people. And so never feel that you're too small to make a difference. If we think that, we won't start on the change and then we won't get anywhere. But when we make a start, we inspire others. There's a very beautiful thing that Daddy Janki, who's our spiritual head, had said. She was talking about change and referring to Gandhiji, who of course brought about tremendous change and is till today an incredibly inspiring example for all of us. And she said that Gandhi was great, but what we need now are communities of greatness. So we all need to step up to those principles of greatness, which are the values of respect, of tolerance, and of non-violence. Non-violence is absolutely a key. And so today you see a lot of violence. The practice of non-violence, first within and then externally, can change that whole vibration and the whole momentum and the whole direction that the world is going in.
I like what you're saying because it's really turning things on its head. Rather than seeing a world situation and asking what is my response to this, we're saying what is the world that we would like to see? How would we like that world to be different? And let me start being that change myself in the world now and affect what is out there.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think this mirrors as well this other point that you're making of people very often have a feeling that change is handed down to us from government, from people out there. Yeah. And yet what you're saying here is that it's not out there, it's me in here affecting what is happening out there. So we do have it within our hands to make that difference. And that's completely the opposite way round from how most people experience themselves in the world today, which is that change is happening to them. Yeah. They're not feeling in control of their lives and how their life is changing.
Yeah, I really feel it's possible to turn this around. And I have seen myself, people even communities working in different ways, whether they are coming together spiritually, working with ecology, working with the environment, creating sustainable communities. There are actually a lot of examples around the world where things are being done differently, maybe exchanging things through barter rather than through monetary, giving things a monetary value. There are communities that live in that way. There are actually more and more models that are there for us to look at and to think about and to start to apply. But I think what you're coming to is so important. We're really coming to a shift in consciousness, aren't we? And when we still see ourselves as somehow consumers, or, you know, as you say, things being handed down, or somehow seeing our relationship with the earth or with each other as something to use or to make use of, we are not in then a natural relationship with nature. We're not in a natural relationship with ourselves. In a way, it's like going back to original principles, isn't it? And even if you go back a few hundred years, even though in a way there were kingdoms and, you know, that sort of thing, but there was much more a feeling that a community would be sustaining each other, looking after each other. That still applies today in India, much more than in Europe, I can say, you know, where people rely on the health service, the welfare, social welfare, etc. It's excellent those systems are in place because they're needed. But where it takes away from the community looking after each other, that's a difficulty. And actually in many countries it's coming to crisis point now. I was speaking to somebody from South India just a few days ago, and they were telling me, you know, you have to be in the community, you have to show up in the right place, whether it's in church, whether it's in the temple or the mosque, or, you know, with the family gatherings, because that's your social capital. They're the people who will be there to help you when you have a need, and you need to be there with them. And I feel that too in the spiritual community. You know, I say to myself, something's happening, I must be there, I must support this, you know, be together, show support for each other. That feeling of supporting each other will grow. And he said to me, you know, if somebody has to get a loan at the bank, then really it's as if you've got nobody to help you, that you have to resort to that, you know. So this whole thing of community is so important. And we've shifted into a whole other paradigm where the external is important and the physical is important and money is important and profit is important. But actually it's people who are important.
And people getting involved in action,
Yes.
in actually doing something, because that makes you feel better straight away. If rather than just sitting there feeling hopeless and despondent, you decide on a course of action and you set out on that to try and make a difference and improve what is going on around you, the energy starts automatically flowing in a different direction.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's so important to understand what I have to do. Otherwise, life's very difficult. Understand the bigger picture of what's happening and work towards that bigger solution. And as I'm working towards it, I will make those little steps towards it in my life anyway. You know, just to think about being non-violent, what does that mean? It's got a big meaning in terms of everyday life. First of all, if I am not emerging my inner goodness, which is inherent to all of us, if I'm suppressing that inner goodness, that's the first violence we do to ourselves. And then that leaves a vacuum. And then I rely on other things for a sense of identity, my role, my profession, you know, my family, you know, background, etc. And then if somebody challenges that, what happens? I get angry and I defend. Extrapolate that and it leads to war. And the violence we see today is because people have lost sight of who they really are. They've lost sight of their spiritual identity, and all the identity is based on the external role that they play. And so, of course, it's a very fragile identity. You're always having to protect it, you know, and build it up. And you're always having to be worried that somebody else doesn't knock it down. It's not the way to live, really, is it?
And yet our lives now are so dependent upon outside things.
Yes.
I'm looking at just the simple thing of technology.
Yeah.
In such a short space of time, you know, try taking away our computers, our mobile phones.
We don't know what to do.
Which of us is going to be showing resilience in that moment? And that's just one thing that is taken away.
Yeah.
But I wonder if we have a lesson to learn here from India, because they do seem to have a greater resilience when it comes to coping with things that they can make with their own hands. So de-skilled in some ways.
Yeah.
People don't even necessarily cook at home anymore. They buy ready-made meals. You know, everything has come to them via some means that they then have dependency on, and they don't have resilience because of that. Do you think there's a lesson for us in the West to learn from India?
Definitely. I remember we're not as resourceful anymore, you know. I remember going on a motorway journey with somebody, and the person was driving, and he's from Mauritius. And, you know, they haven't got the same sort of system as we have. Now, the car broke down. Now, what do you do in England? You call the AA, you know, this automobile thing.
Association. They call it the fourth emergency service. They come to your rescue and
that's it.
Mend your car for you.
Yeah, so you would call them and you'd sit there for 2-3 hours waiting for them to come. What does my friend do? Oh, he has a look in the engine. He sees it's the fan belt or something, needs water, grabs something, jumps over a fence, sees some water. I never forget it. Goes and brings this bowl of water, is able to put it in the engine. Then I don't know what he got to make a kind of fan belt, and we were off on the road again in about half an hour or so. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, that's resilience and resourcefulness. Not saying, oh, what do I do? Wait for somebody to help me. No, let's get on with it. Let's do something. It's a small example, but it's about a mindset and an awareness, isn't it? So I found that very interesting, and I agree. Yeah, there's lots to learn. We hang around too long when we could be doing something. So yes, very important. But coming back to this change of mindset, change of consciousness, this is where the key lies, and we need to get back in touch with who we really are. For that, we need to come back to our very deep spiritual identity, and that's the bit that's constant and unchanging. So when you come back to that and you experience that, you do feel that you have some consistency in a world that is whirling around you, and then you can move from there. But if you don't do that, you're simply caught up in the spin, and then there's very little that you can do.
For most of us, change, when it occurs, doesn't necessarily mean change for the better.
Yeah,
you know, I think we've come to associate. People resist change, don't they?
They do.
They feel comfortable with their routine, with the things they have around them. They don't want that to change, because when it does change, they often feel it changes for the worse. So you have a sort of a virtuous cycle and a vicious circle, and we need to change from one back to the other. And taking spiritually charge of ourselves is possibly the key for turning that around.
I think it's definitely the key, actually, definitely the key. And you see, you need inner strength to make that change. And am I going to get inner strength from having a nice car or whatever it is? No, I'm not. It's from that divine source that we get inner strength. It's from knowing ourselves that we get inner strength. That's why I know I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing unless I meditated every day. That time of quiet in the morning is when I fill myself with strength. And then throughout the day, no matter what is happening, I have some sort of inner strength and resource to deal with it. It's not that it just overpowers me and then, oh, what am I going to do now? So you need that inner strength. And when something is coming towards you, you need to have, and this is where I feel real power lies, instead of getting into a negative circle of thinking, you change it around and you come into more elevated thinking. So, for example, why are they doing that? They shouldn't be doing that. If you start to think like that, you're then at the mercy of that person who's doing that thing to you or doing that thing that you think is wrong. You are, in effect, then being controlled by them. They're controlling your mind. But if you can turn that around and say, okay, maybe there's something that they've been through, they're behaving like that, and maybe I need to understand better. How can I give them that feeling so that they can be more positive again? How can I help? How can I draw on my resources? It's a completely different mindset to just blaming. And we live in a culture of blame now. And we need to shift from that to a culture of responsibility and accountability.
So how do we teach people who aren't necessarily going to go along and learn how to meditate? What techniques, what easy to use methods can we share with people for when, in a very practical way, they're facing a situation where they don't feel stable, they don't feel secure, they don't have that inner resilience? What can people do?
I find it very helpful to ask key questions to the self. Okay, so situation's difficult. Pause. I feel the pause is really important. You can ask a question. What's really meaningful to me in life? What do I really need? Just a simple question like that. Then instead of blaming someone and spoiling the relationship long term, I realize that actually this person is meaningful to me. This person is important in my life. So I need to take a pause and handle this differently instead of just reacting.
Lovely. Sister Maureen, thank you very much for your words of wisdom today.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you being with us. I hope you've enjoyed some of these points that we've shared, and we look forward very much to your company again next time on Spirit of Change. But for now, thank you and goodbye.